Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the JBDC Virtual Biz Zone. Before I begin, let me just apologize for the absence of my camera in this moment, but I'm working on it and I will ensure that you see me to say hello to me before we leave this morning. Now, this morning we are beginning the first of our two-part presentations in the export series. And this morning we are going to be looking at export readiness and who else is better to speak to us on this topic than a representative from JAMPRO? And so this morning we have with us Miss Janelle Brown, and she is a trade and logistics professional with over a decade of experience in logistics, supply chain management, commercial strategy, and international trade. She is the Senior Export Facilitation Officer at JAMPRO, and she works very closely with our Jamaican businesses to strengthen their export readiness and navigate the complexities of international trade. So you know that Janelle has a whole heap of information and a whole heap of knowledge. And on top of that, she has the qualification for it because she has her master's degree in logistics and supply chain management. And so without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Janelle, and please interact with her so that you can get the best out of this morning's presentation. Remember, it's the first of a two-part series, so we're going to be telling you about the second part of the presentation as well. Also, remember that the session is being recorded, so if there is someone that you wanted to join, you knew of that needed the information but was not able to join this morning, they can always view it on our YouTube channel at JBDC Jamaica. All right, so without further ado, over to you, Janelle.
Okay, thank you so much for the introduction, Sansia, and good morning, everyone. I hope everyone is able to hear me. Can I get a thumbs up from everyone if you're able to hear and see the screen? Okay, awesome. That means we're ready to go. All right. So this morning's session, as you're all aware, is on assessing export readiness. And what I'm going to be doing during this session, I'm going to make it very interactive. So be prepared to open your phones, scan some QR codes, answer some questions, and interact with me during this presentation. I'm not going to be up here talking to you for a whole hour. I'm going to break it up and we're going to have some dialogue so that I ensure that you are understanding what is being said during this presentation, okay? All right. So this morning's presentation, as you can see, is gonna feature a step-by-step guide to assessing products, capacity, and systems that are required to support your export journey. From today's some of the things that is what export readiness means. So from this session and information relayed, you should be able by the end of this session to explain what is export readiness. You should be able to assess if your business is export ready, and you should be able to understand why export readiness matters, especially for MSMEs. As bonus, I will also briefly share what an exporter's journey looks like. And I will also leave some tools that I know exporters will want to, utilize during the process of becoming export ready. So let's begin. So we are going to be looking first at a story of two travelers, Stratty and Huslan. Now, Stratty and Huslan are both first-time travelers. They've never been outside of the country. This is their first time exiting the borders of Jamaica. They both showed up to the airport on the same day for a trip to this new country. We're gonna, for argument's sake, we're gonna say that they're going to Canada for the first time. One of these travelers, it was just a spontaneous trip for them. A friend suggested last week that they should visit, and they decided, well, I'm gonna do and visit my friend in Canada. So they just showed up at the airport 1 week later for this trip. The other traveler has their itinerary planned out for the last 6 months. They've done the research. They're ready for this trip. They're ready to go. Everything packed and planned. Now, can you guess just by looking, and please don't beat me down because I did not choose the genders, so I don't want anybody to think that I'm discriminating here. But can you guess who is who just by a look of what they have in their hand? Anybody in the comments? All right. So we have Strati. As you can tell, based on the documents that she has in her hand, she has all her travel documents ready. She has her in-transit and cross-border visas because, when she gets to Canada, she might want to hop over to New York and she wants to make sure that she had all her documents in place to facilitate that movement, right? She knows where she will be staying. There's no guesswork about her reservations and what stops she'll be making while she's there. She has secured her transportation. So she knows exactly what's gonna happen when she exits the airport and how she moves from point A to point B while she's on this trip. She's packed for the weather because, of course, if she's going to Canada, she's going to need some cold weather garments. And if she's hopping over to another country while she's there, she's gonna need to adjust with clothing for that weather as well, right? Because she's going to a country that speaks multiple languages, she has downloaded Duolingo. So, of course, in the event that she needs to understand someone else while she's there to communicate, she has the tools and she's ready to do so. She has planned activities and reservations for each day, so she's maximizing this trip. She's not letting any day on this trip go to waste, right? And of course, most importantly, she has her funds secured for all of what she has planned, even miscellaneous. So, in addition to all of the activities that she has planned and all of the cross-border movements and the shopping that she budgeted out and prepared the funds for, she has her rainy day funds just in case something happens, she's covered. Now, Strati by this, is well prepared. So when she gets to the customs officer, they check for everything and they realize that this is a well prepared traveler. She's ready for her adventure. And in less than 5 minutes, she's allowed to enter the country. Now let's look at Husland. Husland, on the other hand, has no idea where his friend lives, how long he'll be staying there, if the friend even agreed for him to stay there for the entire time. He has no idea. He's just showed up because the friend suggested that he should visit. He's only packed summer clothing. So clearly, Husland didn't consider where in Canada he might be going, what the weather might be like, and he's going to need to spend when he gets there to get into the correct clothing, right? He says he'll figure things out when he gets there. So he has nothing planned, no activities, no reservations. He doesn't know what he's going to want to do as yet. So when he gets there, he'll, just play by ear. And that's fine if you're going on a trip. He's planning to call a taxi when he gets to the airport. So he doesn't really know how he's leaving the airport. He didn't bother to make any plans with his friend. He just assumes that he can just get on the app and book a taxi to get to where he needs to go. And lastly, he's using his credit card alone to fund this spontaneous trip. So he has no cash, no idea what it's gonna cost him to spend, but he is just hoping that his credit card limit will be enough to take him through this trip. So, of course, he spent some time with the customs officer because he was an underprepared traveler that's just praying for the best. Luckily, the customs officer, after 2 hours of interrogation, decided that Husland can enter the country. Now, what we want to take away from this story is the mindset about exporting because export readiness very much starts from that mindset. You can either think about it as a strategy or you can think about it as a hustle. Now, I'm going to compare the two, and I guess you can decide which one of those mindsets you want to have when you are considering export. If we look on the strategy mindset that Stratty took, it was less stressful because she has planned everything out. She knows what to do. She knows where to go. She knows how each day is supposed to be scheduled. So she has a plan. And because she has a plan, she's able to capitalize on her time and effort during her stay. So she's made the most of all the available opportunities during her stay. She knows that Jimmy Fallon is gonna be having a show, so she's booked it in advance, so she's able to go. She knows that she wants to go to this cafe and that cafe, so she's made reservations to go to those places. And she's not just there wasting time sitting on somebody's couch instead of maximizing the opportunity while she's in market, while she's on vacation, I should say. She's able to also control her spending within budget because she has things planned. She found out, she did the research to find out how much each of these things are going to cost, and she made preparations for it. So she's not spending out of pocket. Um, and most likely, she will enjoy her trip because she's planned, she knows what she wants to do, she's doing all of what she wants to do, and she can now easily just make connections and have fun while she's there. The hustle mindset, on the other hand, is more stressful. It might seem like, at the end of the day, it's less stress because you don't really have to think about all of these things. But when it comes down to the moment, it is more stressful because a hustle mindset, as Hustlan sees, he will cause him to have to be thinking and pivoting constantly in the moment. He doesn't have the plans prepared. And so because of that, every decision is in the moment. He has no research, no prior information to contribute towards what he's doing. He's just making a decision in the moment. He doesn't know if it's a good decision, if it's a bad decision. He's just making decisions. Um, of course, missed opportunities because he doesn't know what he doesn't know. He's unprepared to be there. He's unaware of what might be happening that he might want to be a part of. And he might reach late because he didn't know. So by the time he finds out, it's finished, it's gone, or, time has passed. And of course, the increase doesn't give him the leg room to book in advance and then say, okay, it's going to cost me less if I prepare the funds ahead of time. He's having to spend in the moment. And you know how it goes when you spend in the moment, you end up paying more last minute, right? And of course, last and most important, he runs the risk of being returned on the flight because if you show up to a country and you cannot prove to that customs officer that you have the right intentions, they will not allow you into the country. So you run the risk of being returned. Now, I say all of this to say that export is not a spontaneous hustle. Export readiness begins with strategic preparation. And just like our two travelers, the outcome of entering a new market can and will vary significantly depending on the level of preparation that you have put into it. So the same shipment can turn up to a country and one is detained and one is cleared simply because of the preparation that has gone into sending that shipment into market. Is everyone with me so far? Can I see a thumbs up? Can I see a thumbs up? Nobody giving me any emotions. Okay. All
Yeah,
right.
man, they're giving you emotions, man.
Oh,
Lots of thumbs coming up.
okay.
So they're
Okay, good.
with you.
Okay, good. All
Yeah.
right. So export readiness is what we are going to define now. Export readiness is a business's preparedness to successfully fulfill opportunities in international markets with the right product, the right resources, the right system, the capacity, the knowledge, and compliance in place. And as you can see, some words are bolded in this on purpose because, as you can see from the example or the scenario before, preparation is key, especially if you want to make use of opportunities. If you are not prepared, you cannot fully make use of the opportunities in the market, right? And of course, you want to enter the right with the right product and the right support system overall. So we're going to get down into what this means throughout the presentation. So before you board a plane, if you are traveling to a country for the first time, what would you need to have ready before you leave? You would need a passport, your travel documents, your visa entry requirements, your money, your budget, your itinerary, accommodation, transportation, appropriate clothing, knowledge of the destination, emergency plans. Well, I'm here to tell you that export is no different. Think of from that scenario, the market is the destination. The exporter is the traveler, and the export readiness assessment is that pre-flight check. So, what this translates to is shipping documents, certificate of origin. Those documents are what you would need in order to move your products to a different country. You need certifications, you need permits, you need licenses. You need to ensure that you have properly planned and you have proper financing to move those products. You've calculated your costs and you have a promotional budget to support the products in that market. And we're going to go back on that later on and why that is so crucial. You need to have a written export plan. A written export plan is like a map for you in that new market. You would need to have distributors, market partners on the ground, shipping, logistics, delivery arrangements, product adaptation. And that's a mindset that you would need to have because, of course, Jamaicans, how we like our products might not be the same as how persons in the market that you're exporting to like those products. So you might have to bear in mind that you may need to change some things, whether it's with the taste profile, whether it's with labels, whatever it is. You might just have to adapt your product to that market specifically. And of course, packaging, labeling. Market research. This one is at the bottom, but it really should have been at the top. Market research is one of those things that you need to have done in order to prepare to enter a new market. And of course, understanding the customers and the market is really what you want to get out of that research that you're doing. Risk management, insurance, contingency plans, and recall procedures. So this is what preparation translates to for an exporter who is preparing to go into market. And of course, as I said, we'll get into the details of these things later on. What I want you to remember today are the 6 pillars of export readiness, because those 6 pillars are what we generally use to assess export readiness. And by the end of this presentation, you should know all 6 of them. So the first one is export planning readiness. And as the name suggests, it's really about the planning process that goes into what you are looking to achieve from your export objectives. So you're looking at trade agreements, you're looking at incentives, you're looking at your written plan, all of those things that we'll get into further. We're looking at financial readiness, the financial capacity to do what it is and execute what you need to execute and sustain it. You're looking at export certification readiness. local and international. We're looking at product and market readiness. And of course, that the name in itself tells you what that is. We're looking at production and operations readiness. And then finally, we'll look at human resource readiness. So the six are planning, financial, certification, product and market, production and operation, and human resources. Those are the six pillars of export readiness that we are going to now delve into. So we ask ourselves how to assess if your business is export ready using these six pillars. So before you ask, where can I sell? You should be asking, what exactly am I trying to achieve and what will it take? That's the question that planning readiness will really address. So in planning readiness, these are some questions that will guide you in terms of how to assess whether you have done the requisite planning to prepare for export. As I said, one of the most crucial questions that should always come first, market research. Have you conducted extensive market research in the target market? And I want to emphasize target market there because a lot of times what happens when we're interacting with persons is we ask, where do you want to export to? And the answer might be anywhere that will take the products. It no matter, as long as the products go out, but it does matter because you have to know where exactly you want to send your products. The world is big and there are a lot of markets with a lot of opportunities. Some of them are right for your product and some of them are not so right for your product. Some of them require a little more work to break into those barriers, and some of them are easy to get into. So you have to know exactly where it is that you want your products to go. It can't just be a guessing game. It can't just be a hustle mindset. It has to be very strategic because strategy can always work in your favor. And I'm gonna later on introduce you to some tools that you can use to conduct that market research as well. Another question you want to ask yourself, are you aware of trade agreements covering your target markets, and do you know how to use them for a competitive edge? Now, that's a big one because a lot of times when persons hear about the trade agreements, they get a little bit nervous. They think it's a little bit too much and they don't realize that it's something that they could potentially benefit from. Now, we have here in Jamaica an agency by the name of the Jamaica Trade Board Limited. And believe it or not, you can call them and you can ask them for that one-on-one session to understand, based on your products, what markets would be most strategic for you to enter and what trade agreements are available to get those products into that market with less hassle. So right in our own house here in Jamaica, we have an agency that caters to businesses who want to make use of the trade agreements, and they will do the handholding and they will guide you through what it is that you want to achieve in terms of utilizing the trade agreements. So that's another question in terms of preparation that you need to have a check on. First, market research. Two, trade agreements. What trade agreements can you utilize? The third question under planning readiness, have you identified government incentives available to support production and how do you know how to access them? So when persons hear incentives, they might not be aware that there is a government incentive by the name of PIR, that's the Productive Inputs Relief. For manufacturers and persons who are in agriculture, there are certain benefits and incentives that the government allows for certain products that allows you to save in terms of products that you possibly have to import either for production or to use as part of, bringing your produce to fruition. So knowledge of those incentives and how to access them is something that you want to consider because at the end of the day, it helps to lower your overall cost. If it is that you need packaging for the soaps that you are manufacturing and you want to sell to New Zealand, but you have to source that packaging from China. The government's incentive is something that you can utilize to bring that packaging for those soaps that you're producing internally in Jamaica at a lower cost because you would have received an incentive that lowers the cost to bring them in. So that's something that you should always consider as part of your planning. And then the last item on the planning, which is one of the most crucial items, is your export plan. Now, your export plan, as I said before, is a map, it's a guide. It tells you when you're going wrong, when you're going off from what it is that you want to achieve. It helps to ensure that there are mechanisms in place that shows that you're not just here on a whim. You're there in the market with intention. You're there in the market to achieve something. You know when you achieve it and you know when you're short. And because you are aware, you're able to adjust, right? It is that target that helps to keep you aligned with your goals. And it also tells buyers in the export markets that you're serious. Imagine you come to the bank and say you want to take out a loan. And I ask you, what's the intention? You don't know, you can't answer, you don't have any statements or anything to show that you are serious or that you have the ability to, do what you need to do to get approved for this loan. I can't take you serious. You probably just came in because you saw an ad and you in here, just wanted to talk. You're not serious. If you were serious, you would have gone, you would have gotten the documentation, come together, put it together in a way and presented it because you're serious and you want to make a pitch. Now, it's the same with buyers in external markets. If it is that, remember, as an exporter, you are new to them. They don't know who you are. They don't know your products. They don't know anything about you. But when you come to them with a plan, they can say, okay, this person is serious because they've clearly identified what it is that they want to do. They've taken the time to document it, and they're now presenting it in a way that helps to pitch what it is that they want to sell. So having a written export plan is something that aids you not only in aligning to your goals, but also in showing that you're serious when you get into that market, and that makes it easier for companies like Jampro to then match you with suitable buyers in market because we know what your plan is. We can read it, we can see where you're going, and we know what it is that you want to achieve. And right here, you can see a little blurb that says, a written export plan brings clarity, direction, and structure. Without one, businesses lose focus. They can misprice products and struggle with weak distribution and brand inconsistencies abroad. Again, just solidifying what would have been stated. And I've left two links below in this slide. One on the government incentives. So if it is that you want to find out more information about the incentives that are available and apply for it, there's a link there that you can click on. And of course, with the export plan, there's a template that we generally ask persons to just look at because it will guide you in terms of the different areas that a typical export plan would need to cover. So you're not just writing a plan, two sentence, two paragraph, and leave it at that. It has to cover, things along the export journey.
Before you move on, Janelle, two
Mhm.
questions I believe would benefit the entrepreneurs. Number one, your second point said, are you aware of trade agreements covering your target markets and do you know how to use them for a competitive advantage? Are you
Mhm.
saying that as an individual entrepreneur. So, for example, let's say I do sauces and I want to export. I can contact the trade board and ask them, who do you have trade agreements with and how can I use them? Is that an option?
So yes, so
Okay.
when you have a product and you would have manufactured that product, you know what goes into that product.
Mm-hmm.
There's a process through the trade board called product analysis. What it is you're asked to complete a form that basically informs them what percentage of the various inputs that goes into your product are originated from Jamaica or within the Caribbean region. And based on the
Okay.
percentages, they can advise you, what markets your product qualifies to enter under the certain trade agreements that are available with Jamaica and other countries. So if it is that you want to know and you want to do that hand holding with them, know how to make use of them, how to access them, Trade Board is the contact agency to start that process with.
Fabulous. And the second question is the same one that Arlene has. You will send this deck via email so that they can access the links?
Yes,
All right, great. Thank you so much. You may continue.
no problem. All right, so for the next slide, I'm going to play a video about why the export plan is important, basically covering all of what was said earlier.
A well thought out export plan can make the difference between generating a few international sales and achieving real business growth. To begin, first determine your potential markets by researching the countries where there may be demand for your products. You'll want to check out the competitive environment and see where your product fits in. You'll also want to know if your product needs special registration or licenses. Keep in mind that the United States has free trade agreements with Canada, Mexico, and 18 other countries. Free trade agreements provide lower tariff rates for qualifying products and generally make doing business easier for U.S. companies. These countries are often a first stop for new exporters. Next, identify your potential customers. Will you sell to wholesalers, retailers, a foreign government agency, direct to consumers, or a combination? Your plan may include marketing and distribution channels that are different for each country or region. Pricing your product for sale abroad is critical and should be in your plan. Your cost estimates should include duties, taxes, shipping, and marketing. All of these factors will impact your profit margin. You'll also want to consider production. Do you have the ability to produce more if demand increases? Will increased production allow you to lower your cost of goods? Also, your plan should state how you will finance your exports, including cost of inventory and marketing. Will you insist on prepayment or can you offer terms? If you're not sure, you might want to investigate financing or insurance options. These resources include your local banking institution, Exim Bank, and the Small Business Administration. Finally, your plan should identify the resources you need, both at your export destination and here at home, to connect you with buyers, freight forwarders, legal advice, and other service providers.
Okay. So as part of that video, you know that they would have mentioned some of the other pillars which the plan must also incorporate. So the second pillar that we will get into now is financial readiness. A profitable export sale can still create a cash flow crisis if you fund production and shipping long before you get paid. Now, one of the things that video mentioned is, can you offer terms, payment terms? That's one thing that a lot of Jamaican exporters, especially small businesses, tend to shy away from. And I want to put some emphasis on this in terms of financial readiness, because if you are purchasing from a factory in China, one thing that you note is that they are not releasing that container to you without collecting even a deposit that covers the cost to transport that shipment to you. So, as Jamaicans, as exporters, no matter how small, why would we release products to buyers that we don't know in markets and lands across the waters without collecting anything at all? Financial readiness is key. You have to be able not only to fund the export process, but also know and be aware of the payment terms that you want to negotiate when you're conducting conversations with these potential buyers. So, some of the questions that you need to ask yourself in terms of financial readiness: have you determined how much capital you'll need for exporting and when you'll need it? You know, usually this is one of the questions that a lot of persons don't fully know because they don't have all the information. Again, I'm going to leave a list of tools, market research tools that enables persons to go and find that information, because it's critical that you understand how much it's going to cost you, or it will cost you a lot, right? Can you assess financing, credit lines, loans, and other fundings to support and sustain export operations? Now, that question is also crucial. If you want to be able to export, I know it's going to sound very hard, but you have to be able to fund it. You have to be able to access financing, because exporting is not cheap, especially if it is that you have big plans and you want to be able to expand in a, comfortable way. If you're taking the hustle mindset like hustler now, you just send a thing and anything comes. But I know that most of you in here don't want to approach exporting in that way. You want to be very strategic. You want to ensure that your product does well. You want to ensure that you're able to collect your funds. And so you have to be able to do the work, do the due diligence, check to see that who you're engaging with are persons that you can collect from. Check to see that the businesses in the market are real. Check to see that, you have enough cash flow to send the products overseas and that you have collected enough to secure payments or enough to ensure that you are not operating at a loss, right? Now, the other critical question is, have you factored all export-related costs into your projections? Again, this question is one that a lot of exporters sometimes can't really answer because they've only thought about the cost to make the product. They haven't thought about all of the other things that contribute to the final price of that item. And if you haven't thought about all of the costs, it means that you're pricing your item wrong. Because imagine I make soap and I'm selling it to the local market. It costs me $15 to produce it and sell it back to the domestic market. But when I need to send it overseas, I have to pay another $15 to get it there. I can't sell that soap locally for $15 and then sell it in the US for $15. I am literally operating at a loss there, or nil. I have to ensure that I capture all the associated costs, including what it costs to get the product into the export market. And then I price my product based on it. But first, as I said, you have to understand what the different costs are. And the tools that I'm looping for the market research will help in that as well. Another thing that sometimes we'll advise persons to do is speak with some customs brokers. Get some quotations. If you're not sure, if it's your first time moving products overseas, get some quotations from the different shipping lines. Find out how much it costs to move a container or a carton to a market that you intend to send the products to, because that will give you an idea. It might not be the final price. The price might go up, it might go down another day, but at least you have an idea of what it takes and the overall cost to move the product, right? Certification, licensing, those are other things that you have to consider as well. And those are usually very specific to the products that you're moving and the markets that you're moving them to. And we'll get into certification and, licenses and permitting in another section. But for now, what I want you to remember is that you need to know all associated costs, right? The next question on financial readiness. Do you have resources to develop a foreign market without endangering your local market position? Now, this one ties back into capacity because if I am going to send my products overseas and my products are doing well in Jamaica, I don't want to get to a state where people are now storming at my doors because they can't get the products locally anymore because I've now turned all of that attention to moving them overseas. You want to be able to still serve both markets because both markets will have a play in your financial cash flow, right? So, can you afford to really export is really what this question is asking, Can you really afford to sacrifice one market for the other if it comes to that? Or is it that you now need to build your capacity in order to do that, right? The final
Janelle,
question.
Janelle, I
Mhm.
know you're at your final question, but there are two questions in the chat that I would love for you to
Sure, I can't answer the
address.
questions in the chat, so forgive
That's
me.
fine. That's why I'm here. All right. So Arlene wants to know, please explain the pros and cons of being a direct exporter versus using a distributor. When you finish with that one, I'll ask you the next one.
Okay, so I really would want to touch more on that in another section.
Okay. All right.
But I'm
Cool.
briefly going to just say that there are pros because, of course, as a direct exporter, you have more control in the say of what happens with your products. But if you're working with a distributor, somebody on the ground who understands the market, you can understand that that person may know more about how to move that product and get it to where you ideally want it to be.
All
So
right.
it's really about understanding what it is that you know in terms of your capabilities and
Mm-hmm.
assessing whether or not it's best to work with somebody who is already established in the market and can get your product out, or if you want to take the risk of doing it on your own.
All right, great. The
Yeah.
other question she's asking is how will the current US tariffs affect exporters in real time? And I suspect she's just talking about the US market for this in
Yeah.
this particular context.
All right. So that's a big question. That's a really
Yeah.
big question because Um, and this ties back into the third question because one of the things that has happened is that it sent a lot of the costing up, as you can imagine. The US is going through a process right now. Some persons are claiming refund on some of the tariffs that they would have unlawfully paid upfront. But at the end of the day, the effect is really that there's a lot of uncertainty in terms of the
Mhm.
costs related to the US market and the tariffs because you don't know when there's gonna be an increase. You don't know if everything is gonna be rolled back in time for you to really claim a refund or not. So a lot of it is still very uncertain. Um, so right now, in terms of planning, a lot of persons are choosing to look at other markets or they make provisions for it in their budgets to buffer any fluctuations that might happen in that situation. Some persons will pay the money up front, or charge it back and pass it on to their customers. It's unfortunate, but it also kind of makes doing business in that market a little bit more less competitive because if you have persons locally who aren't having to pay that tariff versus your products coming in that has that additional cost added to it, as you can imagine, it makes being competitive a little bit more challenging. So
All
that's
right,
really,
one more question before you move on. Are
mhm.
there any resources provided locally for getting in touch with overseas distributors?
So there are resources, but And I'm going to say this with a but, because at the end of the day, even if there is a tool available to say, we can help you to find buyers in a market, or if it is that you come through Jampro and Jampro does the assessment to see if you're export ready and then makes a connection with you in a buyer, you as the business owner, you still have to do your due diligence. You still have to ensure that whatever connections you follow through on them, you keep the connections and the relationship lines open. You check to see that these persons that you're connected with aren't going to take the first three shipments and then run off with the rest of it. You have to find ways to do your checks and balances at the end of the day. Pretty much. But there are resources available in the local market for that, yes.
All right, great. Thank you very much.
Okay. So the last question in this section is, do you have a financial system to track production costs and monitor export cash flow and profitability? Now, for financial readiness, that's also crucial, because if you don't know what's happening with your finances, what are you really doing? How do you know that you're successful in that market? How do you know that you're making a profit? How do you know that you're making a loss? How do you know that you even have any money at all? So you have to have a financial system, and a lot of persons seem to think that financial system means this big software, this big ERP software that the barcode scan it, boop, 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 and everything comes up on the screen. What financial system really means is you have a process in place to track what's happening with your finances. So whether it is that you have an accountant that works with your Excel spreadsheet to track everything going out, coming in, as long as you have a system in place that does that tracking and you can clearly see what's happening with your finances where export is concerned, that's really what it's asking, because that's crucial for any business, whether you're exporting or not. So the export process, hold on. Right. So the export process is not the export price, sorry, is not the factory price. And I would have mentioned this before. You have to consider the different factors that contribute to your profit margins at the end of the day. So the cost to produce it, the cost to export it, the cost to distribute it, which also includes marketing and promotion. And reality check, if you don't know the landed costs, channel margins, and competitor price points, you are not yet pricing for the market. So one thing that a colleague of ours will always say is go into the market if you can. Look on the shelves, see who the competition is, see what they're pricing their products for, and then work it back to see if you can afford to do the same. And if you position your product anywhere near those products, are you going to be profitable? Because you have to ask yourself that question at the end of the day. You might want to, it might seem like a great thing to do to send your product to a certain market, but when you do the calculation, if it's not going to be profitable, it won't make sense. So at the end of the day, you have to be aware of these things and do the necessary calculations. The third pillar is export certification. So we've covered readiness, planning readiness, we've covered financial readiness, and now we're on certification. Certifications and approvals are not paperwork at the end. They can shape whether the product can legally enter the market at all. And this, I want you to think of certification as a visa. If you need to get into a certain market and you don't have a visa, you cannot go. You're going to be sent back. You might not even make it into the plane to begin with, right? So certification is like a visa for products going into certain markets and for certain products going into certain markets. Questions that you need to ask: are your products and production facilities certified by the relevant local authorities? So the first step is local. Has BSJ, SRC, or any of those authorities assessed your products and your production facility to see if you are certified and doing things the way that they are supposed to be done, right? And of course, once you are locally certified, the next question naturally is, have you identified the international certifications your target market requires and started the process? So especially when you're dealing with European markets, certifications are oftentimes a make or break as to whether your products will really be able to enter that market or not, because those markets tend to take certifications very seriously. So if you don't have the certification, you cannot go. What you need to do as an exporter preparing is to find out if your specific products require certifications in the market that you intend. So going back to the first slide, when I said, some persons don't know where they want to send the item to, you ask them where they want to export to, them say, well, anywhere. It cannot be anywhere, because depending on where you want to send your product, there are some specific things that you may require, especially where certification, licenses, and permits are concerned, right? So don't start with which certificate should I get. You should ask first, what is the exact product and HS classification? And by HS classification, we just mean the tariff code, right? The tariff code that is assigned to your specific product. What is the exact product and HS classification for your product? Then you ask which authority in the destination market regulates that product. What mandatory technical, safety, or health requirements apply, and what does the buyer require contractually? Then, of course, what evidence of conformity is accepted? And that simply means, what do you need? Do you need a license? Do you need a permit? Do you need a certification for your specific product in that specific market? So that's really where you start in terms of ensuring that you are ready with certifications, right? And a key point, international certification is not one universal checklist. Requirements are product and market specific, and I would have expounded on that earlier, because specifications for one market will be different for another market. And I'm going to use the travelers as an example here, because Stratty and Hustland were going to Canada, which is cold. So, of course, if you're thinking of certifications or requirements, they would have needed winter clothes to really do well in that market. Now, if they're going to another country like Indonesia or Bali on the beach, it's a little bit different. So even though it's the same persons, going into a different market requires them to pack different types of clothing, because it's market specific. And that's how you have to think of products when it's moving into different markets, right? The specifications and the certifications will vary based on the product and the market. So now we're on to the fourth pillar. We've covered export planning, we've covered financial, we've covered certification, and now we're at market and product readiness, which is one that we'll spend a little more time on, right? A product can be excellent in Jamaica and still be wrong for a particular overseas customer, channel, or market. I would have mentioned this before in terms of the financials, but in terms of the actual product, it can be a wrong fit, which is why you have to ensure that you are ready for the market and your products are ready for that market. So I'm gonna do a quick poll. I want persons to scan the QR code that is on the screen, and we're gonna do a quick poll answering some questions that you see on the screen. So I want everybody to just scan the QR code right now and answer the questions that pop up. And we're gonna take a look at them. I'm gonna give you just a few seconds to just make sure that everybody is able to scan the code, right? Okay. So I'm just going to switch over to the screen. Okay, good. So we have a few We have a few answers coming in. The question is, what are some of the most popular non-Jamaican brands you can recall seeing in the local market? Guys, remember I said brands. I see somebody say Ocho and juices, guys. Brands. So we see somebody said Coca-Cola. Yes. So we see Pepsi, Pampers, Nestle. Yes. Guys, remember, well, brands. Yes. Non-Jamaican brands. Guys, ketchup is not a brand. What brand ketchup do you see from overseas? Gucci, okay. BYD, okay. Heinz, there we go. Heinz is a brand of ketchup that you see. Frito-Lays. All right. Coach. Okay. So we're getting some good answers here. Kraft, that's a good one. You see Kraft. All right. Let me just take a picture so we can remember these. Nike. I see Hillman. I don't think I know that brand, but yes, Hillman Swiss. All right, so we're going to move on to the next question now. How did you first learn about these brands? All right. Advertisement is taking the lead. A lot of persons say you just saw them in the supermarket. Okay. So between advertisements and seeing them in the supermarket, that's how we know about them. Remember now, let me remind you guys of some of the brands that you would have named. We had Nike, Kraft, Heinz. Somebody said word of mouth. Okay. All right, I'm going to move on to the next question now. What made you want to purchase or try these products? So the same Pampers, Coach, Gucci, Pepsi, Heinz, Kraft, Nike, Frito-Lays. What made you want to try those products? All right, TV commercials, the need for it, curiosity, brand name. They look good to the eyes. That's a good one. To form my own opinion, just the appeal of the advert or packaging. That's another good one. Somebody said it was free. They came in a barrel from overseas. Okay. Popularity. It looked enticing to the eyes. Curiosity. Seeing other people use them. Social media hype. Grew up on them. So brand loyalty and attractive. Okay. Okay. So those are some good responses as to some more popularity and quality of the products. Okay. I think we have a good feel of your views on those. So we're gonna jump back into where we are at. All right. So thank you so much for the persons who participated. Now we're gonna see where we're going with that, right? The brands that you would have identified, that's, the Nike, the Heinz, and all of those things, those companies would have had to ensure that they were market and product ready to bring their items to this market, right? Some of the questions that we need to ask ourselves: have you initiated contact with distributors, importers, or sales agents in your target market? Because how else are your products going to be seen, right? If you don't have any contact with a distributor, somebody asked about what is the benefit, the pros and cons to working with a distributor earlier. We're seeing it here. Did Nike come and set up shop in Jamaica? or did they work through distributors to get the products in Jamaica? Did did Frito-Lay have a factory set up in Jamaica? Does Frito-Lay have a sales office set up in Jamaica? No. They worked with importers and distributors to get their products in the market. You know, there's another brand that I'm going to mention that nobody mentioned, Sunshine Snacks. I'm sure everybody here knows Sunshine Snacks. We love Sunshine Snacks, and sometimes we think they're Jamaican, but they're not. Sunshine Snacks originate from Trinidad. And guess what? You would never know. A lot of persons would not know because it's advertised so heavily, it's distributed so heavily in Jamaica that you think is a Jamaican brand. But it's because they have taken that initiative to ensure that they are working with distributors and importers in Jamaica to get their products out and seen in the local market. And that's the same thing as exporters that you need to think of when you are thinking of having your product ready for that market, right? Who can you make connections with to ensure that your products are seen and heard in that market and known? Do you have a promotional budget for trade shows, trade missions, online platforms to engage international buyers? That one is critical. And I'm going to spend some time on that one because promotional budget is something that persons tend to overlook, and it is one of the biggest make or break factors. Remember now, you are new. Nobody knows your product. Your product might be the best thing since sliced bread or the best thing since the internet, but guess what? In another market, in a different country, nobody knows you. Nobody knows your product, and they have other products that are probably similar to it that they can also select from. Your product is not only competing with persons who manufacture in that market, but it's also competing with other exporters who send their products to that same market. So when it's sitting in that market, you have to ensure that you have some money set aside to ensure that your product can be seen. So you need to go to the trade shows to ensure that you know who the right distributors are, you know who is in the market, you know what they're doing, how they're advertising, and the different outlets that they're distributing their products in. You can go on the trade missions that are organized by the government. You know, they'll send out expressions of interest from time to time for exporters to attend these missions so that you can make the connections with the buyers in the market. And of course, there are online platforms, you know, your e-commerce platforms. Do you have the right spend behind those platforms to ensure that persons can engage with you? You know, are your products properly displayed? Can they see your products online? Can you advertise your products online? Do you have brochures? Do you have samples? Do you have in-store activations? You know, when you go into the supermarket or PriceSmart and there's a new product and there's a nice little person there set up with little thing and they say, would you like to try a sample? That is a part of your promotional budget because if it is especially that you have food, I'm not just going to take a new product off the shelf. I mean, I might if I'm, you know, a high risk person, but I might not, I'll be less likely to take a new product off the shelf and just put it in the cart and go home with it to say, well, I'm just going to try it today. You know, you want to know what the product tastes like. You want a sample first. And how do you do that? Do you have a budget to showcase and sample your products in store so persons become familiar with the brand and say, you know what? I'm going to purchase that product because this Jamaican has taken the time to issue samples and I know what it tastes like. I know what food it works with. I know how to pair it with different items. So I'm going to incorporate it into my supermarket budget and check it out of this store today, right? Those are some of the things that you need to think of when you think of promotional budget. It's very important for your products to be seen in a new market. The last question under this section is, are your products packaged and labeled to meet regulatory requirements for your target export market? So in addition to the promotion and the connections with the distributors, can your products make it through the journey. Because at the end of the day, we have to remember that packaging is also a protection. And the label, if you look at the research, a lot of issues that occur from undelivered packages and misplaced packages and damaged packages is because of the packaging and the labeling. Either the packaging wasn't sturdy enough or suitable enough to withhold the transportation of the item, or the labeling wasn't clear and the item ends up in the wrong place. Nobody knows how to identify it. Nobody knows where it's supposed to go to. And it ends up being returned, if even, right? So packaging and labeling are two things that you want to ensure that you check on, not just for that, but in terms of whether you need another language displayed on the label, whether you need a specific measurement displayed on the front of the label, on the back of the label, whatever the requirement for that specific market is, you need to ensure that you are aware so that if you have to change the label for Canada because they need it to have French on it, you are aware. If it needs to go to England and it needs a specific metric on it, you are aware, because those are some of the things that will happen, especially where adaptation is concerned. I know I mentioned it earlier, that you have to consider when sending your products to different markets. So maybe for the US, you don't have any issues, The same label that you use for Jamaica, you can use for the US. But you see, when it needs to go to Canada, you're going to have to make some changes to the label. You have to consider all of those things, right? Are there any questions in the chat? No? Everyone is clear so far? Have I lost anyone?
Your colleague is doing a good job of answering the questions in the
Okay,
chat.
awesome,
Yeah.
awesome,
All
awesome.
right.
All right. So we would have covered these. Of course, the due diligence. I want to emphasize on this point that says don't stop at the contract. When you negotiate with buyers in the market, what you want to think about is visiting the market, because you have to do the due diligence, right? When you're making the connections, go into the market always if you can, to just check, see how the things will flow, who the people are, and all of those things, just to make sure that everything checks out. The promotional budget, again, before entry, at entry, after entry, because feedback is also important. And going back to the question earlier about the distributor, distributors on the ground will give you the feedback once you ask as well. So they have the visibility there. They're in the markets. You are not. So you can always also lean on them to find out what can be done differently to ensure that the products are successful. So if you realize that the sales are slow, you can always communicate with them. Okay, what can we try differently? What's the feedback so far? Are persons engaging with the products? Are they not engaging with the products? Are the competition doing something different that you now need to include? You have to ensure that there's a line of communication if you choose to work with a distributor, so that you can also get a feel of what is happening on the ground. And of course, we would have gone over the labeling and packaging requirements. All right, so product readiness is more than, is the product finish, right? The market decides whether the product is actually ready, and that's based on quality, shelf life, packaging, labeling, differentiation, and positioning. So with quality, you want to ensure that there's consistency. BSJ, SRC, those are some of the agencies locally that can help to ensure that your product, the formulation, and the processes that you're using results in a consistent product that you're sending. Because one thing, when something changes, So you can't send it the pepper sauce today and it's hot, 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 hot. And then next time you send it not so hot. Persons are going to not want to continue buying your product if there isn't a consistency with the quality, right? Shelf life, you have to factor in the channel because based on how long it is supposed to stay fresh, can your product make it to market and sell in time, or is it going to go stale before? You have to consider those things because you're moving your products overseas and anything can happen, especially where delays are concerned, right? Packaging, can it survive? Labeling, does it meet the destination requirement? Differentiation, clear reason to choose it. Why am I choosing your product? So just like from the poll that we took, persons would have said look and feel, persons would have said the advertisement. Those were some of the reasons coming out as to why you would have chosen products that are in our local market from overseas. And that's something that you need to think about when sending products to another market. What is your differentiation? What is your reason? What reason are you giving person to choose your product over another one, especially a product that is manufactured in their own country? Because they might be loyal to a company that produces products from their own country. But what about your product is going to make them say, I'm going to buy this product instead? And then positioning. Are you using the correct channels based on who it is that you're targeting to buy? You can't want to sell food and the only thing that you're doing is putting up a billboard ad. People can't taste a billboard. They can't smell the billboard. They can't feel the billboard, right? You might want to use a billboard, yes, but you want to back it up with some in-market sampling so persons can get a feel of what the item that you're selling for them to eat smells, tastes, and feels like, right? So the positioning is important. And in practice, placement, positioning, and support is what gets you noticed. So research your placement, understand which retail channels are best for your product in that market and that connect with your target audience best. And those are the channels that you want to utilize. And you also want to ensure that if you work with a distributor, that they understand placement and they're not just putting your products anywhere, right? Because they can take your products and put it on the back shelf and nobody ever sees it. And then they say, well, your product's not selling, but they really haven't placed your products in an ideal position to be sold, right? Position with intention. Decide how you want to be perceived in terms of quality, price point, story. Story is a big seller. When you come and you say, this product is authentically Jamaican, tell us about the story. How did you get started? What was the reason behind the brand? People connect with stories, and because they connect with stories, they'll more likely connect with their brand because they'll remember the story behind the brand and it might resonate with them. If your product appeals to mothers and children, they might connect with it based on the story. You started because you needed a solution for shampoo for your child that had eczema. And so they say, well, this is a natural product that caters to that. So they'll connect with it and they'll buy into the story and buy into your brand. So story is important to create as well when you're thinking about placement and being noticed. Plan how you'll support the product. Again, pointing back to promotion, awareness, do you have the capacity to offer a giveaway? Do you have the capacity to offer discounts, sampling? All of those things that help you to push your product in a market, especially where it is new. So if we call back to our poll, think back to some of the brands that were named. The Pampers, the Always, some of the other brands that you guys would have listed. None of them showed up on the shelf just by chance. I know somebody said they just saw it on the shelf, but someone would have planned exactly how you would hear about those products, right? And they would have used strategy to do so. So we're at the fifth pillar. So we've done planning readiness, financial readiness, certification readiness, and we just did product and market readiness. And now we're at production and operation readiness. We're almost to the end. So bear with me here. So the real readiness begins when someone says, great, we want 5 times your normal order next month. Do you have a quality assurance system to consistently meet international standards? Again, going back to local agencies, BSJ can help and guide persons where quality systems are concerned. You want to ensure that your structure is one in which persons can depend that you are going to give them the same product consistently, right? Is your current production capacity sufficient to scale for future orders? So if somebody comes in and they want 5 times the order, can you meet it? Can you make those products? It's one thing to send a product, and they love it. But when they come back with a big order, can you fill it? Because what happens if you can't is you've enticed that buyer and then you have now broken their expectation because you're not able to meet their demand. So one of the things that we will always ask persons about when we're assessing readiness is capacity readiness. Are you able to meet an order that is 3 or 4 times your normal production for the local market? Because usually what happens in exports is that persons, especially for the bigger markets, will want large volumes. They're not looking to send, shipping is expensive, They're not looking to send things 1-1. They'll take a big order and they'll distribute from that big order before they take another order again. So, can you scale to meet orders that are large, right? When you're talking about real exports, you have to be able to secure capacity. So maybe that's something that you might want to go back to engage DBJ about. DBJ offers loans, they offer grants that will help with capacity building. So what that means, you have to expand your space, add another line of machinery to produce more, or change the machinery that you have in the space that can produce more. Those are some of the considerations that you want to have for export, because the volume is really where you will maintain a good relationship with buyers. Once they see that you can't really meet the demand, they're gonna look elsewhere and they're gonna look to markets that can produce those volumes, right? Do you have systems or procedures for financial management, planning, production, order fulfillment, sales? All of those things are important as a part of your operational readiness, because if you don't have systems in place, there is going to be chaos. And the system cannot be that somebody knows the process in their head. It has to be where if you hire somebody new today, they can look on the manual or whatever the process is and understand what it is that they need to do to contribute to the overall production, right? If an order comes in, they know what to do from start to end. If our order needs to be packed, they know what to do from start to end. So do you have those systems in place? And again, system doesn't have to be any big highfalutin thing that you log into. It just means that you have something in place that prescribes what is to be done for different things needed. Have you prepared for any special storage conditions that may be required? So do you have space for those large orders? Before packing them and sending them, can you hold them? Does it need cold storage at the port? Those are some of the things that you have to consider, because you can't send any products and then something happen and they miss the ship and they're out there and then they spoil. You have to be able to see ahead, especially where logistics and supply chain is concerned. You have to be able to take 10 steps ahead of the game and have a plan for everything that can possibly go wrong. So if it is that there's a delay, can your items be stored in a place that will maintain or protect the quality of the product, right? Have you identified packaging specifications to protect products through shipping? We would have mentioned that before. And can you manage traceability and product recall if needed? Now, that's especially important for the US market, especially where the FDA is concerned, because traceability is a big thing for them. I don't know if you guys heard of the outbreak the other day with, I think it was lettuce, that was sending some viral infection around. Now, without traceability and product recall, they wouldn't know where to tell you not to buy from. So that's super important for certain markets to be able to say, well, you as a manufacturer can trace where the item that would have been defected has originated from to be able to stop it and to bring those products back in and to prevent anybody from, worst case scenario, dying from the consumption of or use of your products. So that is very important, especially in certain markets. Can you make the product consistently and scale? Again, we would have, mentioned these things earlier. Bioconfidence equals consistent quality and consistent supply. And that's bolded and in yellow for a reason. If you want strong connections with your buyers, you have to ensure that your quality is consistent and you can consistently supply the product when needed, right? And these are just an explanation of the different systems that you want to have in mind when you are thinking about operational readiness. Your financial management, which you should have a system that manages your cash flow and your working capital to make sure you have the money to do the things that you need to do. Your production planning, do you have capacity? Do you have a production schedule? Do you know when the different things are going to be produced in order to plan for it? Order fulfillment from ordering to shipment to delivery. Do you have a system in place to be able to say what is happening at a snapshot? Sales process management. Do you have a system in place to manage leads, inquiries, and sales and do that conversion? Export documentation. Do you have a system in place to ensure that you have your documents and that they're compliant and you have them stored? A red flag, which I would have mentioned earlier, is that we have a person who knows how to do it. It is not the same as we have a repeatable system. So again, it doesn't have to be a system that you log into. It just has to be that there's a prescribed process in place and anybody who is qualified can come, look at that prescribed process and execute what needs to be done because there's a process and a system in place for it. And of course, map the order from purchase order to customers. So understanding this will help you to identify any gaps in your production and operation readiness. When you're able to identify what the experience for a customer will look like, an expert customer, from the point of receiving an order to the point of delivering and receiving feedback from persons in that market. One thing that you need to ask yourself at every step: who owns this process? What evidence of it exists? When must it happen? And what can go wrong? Because answering those questions will help you to be ready in the event that anything goes wrong, right? Because we're not saying that being ready, nothing will go wrong. Things can go wrong. But if you have covered all of these things and you have asked all the relevant questions, it means then that if something goes wrong, you know what to do because you already have a plan as to what to do if this happens, right? And we now go into the last pillar of export readiness. So we've covered planning readiness, we've covered financial readiness, we've covered certification readiness, product and market readiness, production and operation readiness, and the last pillar is human resource readiness. Export readiness cannot sit entirely on the owner's head. And I know this one will hit a lot of entrepreneurs and MSME owners because a lot of times the owner of the business is also the head cook and bottle washer, right? Now, as much as we understand that you take on a lot because the business is your baby, it cannot be that everything is happening and it's happening inside your head and you are responsible for everything. Because if you're scaling for export and you want to do it correctly, you have to ensure that your staff is knowledgeable and empowered to execute other functions in the process. So one of the things that you want to ask yourself is, does your staff have the knowledge in negotiating contracts, in executing export procedures, in handling documentation for export, and in international sales management. And then knowing, have you appointed someone to manage the production and delivery of export orders? Now, asking yourself these questions, if the answer is no, it doesn't mean that there aren't things that you can do to get there. So one of the things that you can do to close that gap is to train. Identify who it is that you can get to train your staff or yourself in the areas that you need to be ready for export. If you're not familiar with export documentation and you're exporting for the first time to a new market, don't be like Hustland. Do not just show up with no information. Go and do the research. Get in touch with a broker, licensed customs broker. Get in touch with persons who are familiar with trade, experienced distributors, and work with them, even if it's just for the first couple of orders, just to get familiar with what the process is and what you need to do. You can also, of course, always hire or outsource persons with that specialty in order to fill that gap. And of course, documented rules reduce dependence on one person. So again, it's not all just on the owner of the business. Have other persons that you can depend on to execute other areas of the business where export is concerned, because export is big business. As small as your company might be, it is big business. And what you don't want to do is to ruin the relationship that you have with a buyer before you even get started with them, right? So practical readiness interview. Don't just say yes to the questions, Show me how it's done. Show me the plan. Show me the standard operating procedures, the certifications. Walk me through what happens from order to shipment. Who owns it? Name the person responsible at each critical step. Ask the what if questions. Test the capacity. If you get an order bigger than what you would have normally filled, what do you do? What happens if there's a defect? What happens if there's a payment delay? What happens if the regulation changes? All of those things you want to bear in mind, just to be able to stress test whether you're able to operate if something happens. And how do you know? Ask for records, ask for reports, ask for logs, ask for certifications, ask for performance data. So don't be shy about asking certain things, because at the end of the day, you are under scrutiny as a new exporter in a new market. From the point of entry at border control, customs in the other country is scrutinizing you because they don't know you. They don't know your products. It's the first time you're moving products. So you have to ensure that you cover all of your checks and balances to ensure that when you go into that market, you can produce all of the relevant paperwork, you can produce all the relevant certifications and permits. You know what is supposed to happen, you know where the products are supposed to go, and you have all of your bases covered, right? So how to tell if your business is export ready? After going through those 6 pillars and asking yourselves all of those questions, you might have gaps, but 5 questions that you want to ask quickly. What exactly am I exporting and where? Can I meet the destination's requirements? Can I produce and deliver consistently? Can I finance the export cash cycle profitably? And if a buyer orders tomorrow, who will do what? So export readiness is not about being perfect. It's about knowing your gaps before the market exposes them. And when you identify those gaps, what you have to now do is to action them. And I keep talking about the tools at the end of the presentation, which I'm leaving in the slides for you to go through. Those tools are what will guide you on creating that action plan to close those gaps. So once you've identified the things that you don't have and that you don't know, you go and find out. You go and get them done. You put an owner on it, you put a deadline on it, because if you don't put a deadline, all next year before you do it. So you say, okay, in the next 6 months, I need to go and get certified by BSG because I don't have that ready. In the next 3 months, I need to have my written export plan documented. In the next 2 months, I need to have had conversations with at least 3 buyers in New York because that's the market that I want to enter, right? So those are some of the things that you now put into action once you've asked all relevant questions along the 6 pillars and identified your gaps. And of course, over time, you'll be able to convert from not yet to ready to scale. So along the way, when you complete all of those actions to close the gaps that you've identified in assessing your readiness, you will eventually move to a state of being ready to scale for export. So why does all of this matter for MSMEs? MSMEs are at a critical point in development. You can't afford to waste resources or ruin your reputation at an early stage. And because of that, you have to ensure that you go through and assess whether you're really ready to start exporting. And you don't waste no money trying to figure it out while losing business, right? So it prevents you turning up unprepared like a certain person earlier in the scenario. It reduces costly mistakes, from not having things prepared, certification permits. It protects your investment because, again, you are spending money to send these products overseas. The worst that can happen is that it gets to the port and they discard it or they send it back, right? You would have lost everything there. It helps you to deliver on your promise. So, of course, when you're ready, you already agreed with a buyer that the buyer wants certain products and you're sending them. When you're ready, it means that, yes, you took the order and you meant it. You delivered on that promise, right? And of course, it builds buyer confidence because at the end of the day, when you're able to deliver confidently and consistently, then you can form great relationships with buyers in the intended markets. Right. So that really brings us to the end of the export readiness assessment process. What I've left in the rest of the slides, because I think we might be into our Q&A time now, right? But what I've left in the slides that will be sent out to you guys is just a synopsis of what the journey looks like, as well as some practical tools to facilitate the market research that you guys need to do, to contact information, a directory for all of the agencies and the role that they play in helping exporters along the way, and just some useful tools that can be used to facilitate export readiness overall. So those tools will be in the rest of the slides once you receive them and you can make use of them. So that is the end of this segment. I'll take any questions. Are there any more questions in the chat or
Well,
anything?
Janelle, you outdid yourself. Trust me. I was making notes because I feel like I was in school, but it wasn't a boring school.
Oh,
You
that's
know them
excellent.
kind of way there? Yeah,
That's
man.
excellent.
Really, really great presentation, and it's being echoed. And if you can see the emojis going up, persons are appreciative of your presentation. Before we jump into the questions, though, I just want to bring to the audience's attention that I have dropped some 2 links in the chat. One is to register for part 2 of the session, which is going to be next week, Tuesday morning, this same time at 10 a.m. And that session will be conducted by the Bureau of Standards. So now that we have assessed our readiness, what we're going to be doing is preparing the products for the market. So we're now going to delve into what products and which markets they're going into, right? So that's the first thing. Secondly, I have dropped a link to a feedback form because we want to know what you thought of this morning's session. I will also want to get from you what are some other areas that you would want us to cover. No, Janelle, to your questions. First question I'm seeing. Would you be in a position to advise on available provisions for the export of frozen goods?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Right. So, what's her name? Deb is asking, would you be in a position to advise on available provisions for the export of frozen goods?
Okay, so provisions for the export of frozen goods. I'm interpreting that question, perhaps, is it from the end of incentives when you say available provisions?
I'm not so sure. Deb, you want to hold up your hand for me and let me open your microphone and all right, here she goes. I am going to ask you to unmute. Deb, unmute for me now, please, because I can't unmute you.
Oh,
Oh,
all
there you
right,
go.
got.
Go ahead.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate this. Great presentation again. So not in terms of incentives, but in terms of just shelf life, ensuring, it doesn't get affected outside of the frozen conditions it would need.
Okay, so I can't give you too much details on that, but I can tell you that there are provisions, there are cold storage um, entities that you can engage because of course, the port is not responsible for keeping your items in that state required or at a specific temperature. The onus is on you as the exporter to seek what solutions are available in the market to help to keep your products in a certain um, condition, right? Um, but in terms of availability, there are some private companies that do offer those services. I can perhaps find out exactly who they are and maybe share it with Sansia and she can pass the information along. But in terms of engaging entities, there are entities, private sector entities out there that you can engage for that kind of service. Outside of that, it would just be to research and see what packaging solutions are also there to help to extend um, the freshness of those products. Well, not freshness because it's frozen, to
Right.
help preserve the
Mhm.
the temperature for those items. So if it is that you need to place them in a specific, as I said, storage or packaging or whatever it is to help to extend the state of it while it is, in transit, those are some of the
Mhm.
things that you can look into. Yeah.
All
I
right.
see
Another
a comment. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Another question. Leith Forster James. You are unmuted. You can go ahead with your question, please. Leith, are you able to?
Before she answers to my colleague also mentioned reefer containers. So of course, if you're sending it by container, there are reefer containers, and you can engage companies like Seaboard, who does reefer, which is the refrigerated containers that help to keep the temperature under control. Right.
All right. Great. Leith, are you able to speak? All right. Let me look for another question in the chat. Do you have programs where entrepreneurs can join to ensure they have a relationship with JamPro?
Okay, so we have um
Hold on.
somebody's unmuted. Is it the same
Go
person?
ahead. No, it's not the same person. Go ahead.
Okay, so we do have what's called an accelerator program here at JamPro. That persons would have to register. It's called Export Max. Usually, when persons sign up with that program, it's a capacity building program that helps to prepare you basically for export. And it's, I think, a 2-year program that they run in order to take you through different courses, introduce you to mentors who are experienced exporters and just kind of help to build the capacity required to export. So we do have that program. It's not so much a training program, but it does entail training and mentoring
Right.
in
How
terms of.
often can persons just sign up for it, or is it an
So
intake?
So it's an intake because
Okay.
there's as I said, it's a 2-year program, and of course, they have to work with those persons in that cohort. So there's going to be an expression of interest for persons to join the next cohort this year. And that should be opening up soon. So as soon as I have information on it, I can also
Can you
just
share that with me so
share
that
it.
we can well,
They
we
can
usually
circulate
work
it
together,
as
so I
well.
don't know why I said that. Sorry about that. We
Right.
usually, yeah, we're
Someone
usually
can
aware.
So once the registration for the new cohort is available, we can share it as well so that you are in the loop and you're able to see and look if it is something that you want to join into. And I know it's very interactive, so they do require you to participate in the sessions as well. Yeah.
All right, for the benefit of everyone, even though I noticed that it kind of did get answered already, are the trade missions usually overseas? And what announcement channels should we look out for upcoming trade missions?
Okay, so trade missions, we have both inward and outward trade missions. Usually, the outward trade missions, there's an expression of interest that's usually circulated through the various sector teams. I believe they also circulate it in the media,
Mm,
so that when persons see it, they're able to register to express interest in attending the mission based on where the mission is headed to, what
mm.
country, and the different prospects. So usually, once they have everything packaged in terms of the various costs and what benefits you will get out of the trade mission, they usually send it out, as I say, as an expression of interest. So that you can look to come from either us internally at Jumper if you're in our email listing, or as I say, usually they'll also post it. So you can look for us on either LinkedIn or on social media, Instagram. Most likely you'll see it on LinkedIn before anywhere else, but usually once the package is ready, it's circulated there as well.
All right. Let me see. So how are persons able to join your mailing list for argument's sake? Do you want to leave some contact information where persons can, reach out to JamPro?
Okay, so I'm gonna share my screen again with the contact slide
That would be
because
great.
usually send once you send us any questions or you just send an email to state that you wish to join our exporters mailing list.
Right.
Usually we will add you to that mailing list. So when we're circulating any information from our end, you would be included, right?
All right. Fantastic.
Mhm.
All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, there it is. That's the contact information for JamPro. All right. I'm not seeing any further questions at this time. So I want to extend my thanks to you, Janelle, for really it's not even excellent. It was beyond excellent. It was a really useful, information-packed session, and we really appreciate it.
Mhm.
The session is recorded, and of course, Janelle is gonna share with me the slides, and
Yeah.
so everyone in today's presentation will get a copy of it, providing that the email address that you provided to us was correct. So I
Yeah.
hope that it is so that you can get it. A reminder as well, we have part 2 of the session next week, Tuesday at this time, same place. And someone is saying, please make sure the links are live in the deck. So
Yes,
that
they are. They are.
okay.
They
All
are.
right,
They
great. So
are.
when you get it, Arlene, you will be able to click on the links and do what you need to do. Again, thank you so much,
Okay.
Janelle. Really appreciate it. Thank you everyone for
Okay.
joining and enjoy the rest of your day.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.